What's a story you're dying to tell? Story number 1. I was walking down the street in Sag Harbor, New York, the Hamptons. I lit my cigarette and this guy asks me for a light. He is dressed down, kinda rough looking. We talk until we finish smoking. And he invites me into an expensive bar for a drink. He buys me a $25 glass of cognac, only about 1/4 inch full, and introduces me to his wife and friend, some famous artist. We have a few drinks and swap stories. He had sailed his boat from Connecticut, and the water was too rough to return. His son and daughter-in-law had to be back home for work the next morning, so he had his helicopter pick him up. We all went to a haunted house, they smoked a bowl, and we returned to the bar. Turns out this guy is a mobster and rich as fuck. We go out for another cigarette, and a bus pulls up with 3 attractive women with baggage. The mobster invites them in for drinks and tries to get me laid. The hottest of the girls was shocked that I didn't know who she was. She claimed to be an actress, so I asked what movie she was in. She says, "Money Talks." I check IMDb, and she is not listed. I then remember that there is a porn with the same title. She was a porn star. I personally racked up a $1,200 bar tab that night, all of which the mobster insisted in paying for. I cabbed it back to the house I was staying at and called it a night. I never heard back from any of the group. Story number 2. When my best friend and I went backpacking in Europe, we had just left Oktoberfest in Munich and got on the night train to Paris. In the mix of things, we accidentally switched tickets. I found my cabin with 5 quiet Asian travelers, and we all went to sleep pretty much right after the train started to go. After the heavy amount of partying that took place, that sleep was one of the best ones that I've had. I woke up in the morning feeling refreshed and went to look for my friend a few cabins away. But she was gone. After locating her and seeing how much she looked like shit, she proceeded to tell me that her cabin was made up of 5 drunk French men, 5 very drunk French men. They had a good 1 to 2 hours of being rowdy and loud for a while, then things finally started to quiet down in the cabin. In the middle of the night, my friend felt someone smack her head. She thought it was the very burly drunk men sleeping in the bunk right across from hers, and just moved farther back into the bunk towards the wall, when someone smacked her head again. She lifts her head up and something falls off. She touches it and it's poo. The 250-pound man was shitting his pants and throwing poo at her in his drunken sleep. She screamed, ran out of the bunk, and found someone that works on the train. The woman laughed at her and directed her to the bathroom, where the sink's water pressure was equivalent to the water pressure of something with low water pressure. I can't think of a clever analogy right now. She refused to go back to the bunk, had to go find an empty seat for the duration of the train ride. Story number 3. When I was 15, I moved to Utah. It was a smaller town just north of Salt Lake City and far enough west that the wind would carry in the smell of the lake and the air would reek of spoiled sea. I got dropped halfway into sophomore year, which was terrible for an awkward kid in a new place because in Utah they began high school with sophomore year, so I was effectively a freshman twice. The only luck I had was a girl I had met named Sarah, and we started dating right at the end of the school year, so we were able to spend a majority of the summer together. Now, you might not know this about Mormons, and I certainly hadn't, but in their church they really like big families, something about spirits in heaven requiring bodies. So it wasn't uncommon for some of the more devout Mormon families to have 8, 9, or more kids. It really just meant outdoor freezers packed with hamburger helper and houses with bigger kitchens. Sarah's family was pretty Mormon, and my family didn't practice much of any religion, so we just never discussed it. She had 6 sisters, 7 in total including her, ranging from 6 years old to 18. I only met her mom once, and she was always pregnant, and I never spoke with her dad. I was a little too overwhelmed by meeting her family, and I avoided it. I probably would have figured it out then, but I had only lived in Utah for 6 months, and everything already seemed so weird to me. I remember a particular night I had picked her up. She had a curfew that made it so I had to park down the street so she could sneak out. I wanted to jump over a small gully flanked by trees beside her house. But she refused and we had to walk around, which meant passing by her parents' window. I thought it was weird, but I just assumed she was worried she might get her feet wet. It went like that for a couple months. I would stop down the street and I would wait while she walked beside the gully, around her house, and up the street to meet me. Sometimes I'd meet her at the road, but I was always careful not to walk too far onto the lawn, for fear I'd wake her parents. One night it was raining, and I didn't want her to walk alone through the dark in the rain, so I had planned on surprising her by meeting her by the back door she snuck out through. To save time and avoid walking by the window, I walked through the trees to the gully. The water was a bit higher and moving quicker than normal because of the rain runoff, but I figured I could make the jump. Man, I was wrong. My feet landed in the mud on the other side, but I sank immediately in the wet earth and splashed backwards hard into the muck. The rush of cold water was a shock, and I reached up and grabbed a storm drain. But what I had grabbed dislodged and flowed down with me. The water wasn't very deep, maybe 2 or 3 feet, so I stuck my shoes in it and stood up still, holding what turned out to be a black garbage bag. I dropped it and started to crawl up, and my hand landed on another black garbage bag. I tried to crawl up, but they kept dislodging in the slick viscous grime. It must have been the 3rd or 4th time. I tried to find something to grip onto when I accidentally tore one open. At first I thought it was a rotten orange, black and decaying, among a spoiled nest of old bones. But I could just make it out, yellowed skin bloated on the white bone. It was a skull, tiny a baby's. I let out a shout. I didn't know what else to do. It smelled awful, and I had an overwhelming urge to get away from it. Quickly, I scrambled up through the mud and kicked myself up against a tree, my heart racing. Sarah was there. She was crying. She had been waiting for me by the street and came over. When she heard me shout, she must have always known. I never saw her again, and all the girls were pulled out of school. The local news report said that her father had decided he had enough kids and had been burying each newborn out by the gully. But they recovered 5 tiny bodies, all girls, and I wonder if he had just been waiting for a son. Story number 4. When I was a freshman in high school, I showed up one day and almost everyone was silent. I asked a few friends what was going on, and apparently a girl, senior, died in a car accident. I felt kinda sad to see so many people mourning, but really just didn't let it bother me. The name sounded familiar, but I didn't think anything of it because I already hear so many names. I go to my first period, and the announcements come on, and the principal says a few words about the girl. One of her friends in front of me cries. My second period is English, and my teacher, who I hated, has been crying, saying that she really cares about us, etc. She had the girl as a student. I can't really remember third period, but fourth period is piano. I go to my piano class and I see my guidance counselor in the window. Out of 10 students, 6 are seniors. I go in and sit down at my usual seat. My guidance counselor is crying, of course, and saying that she is going through all of the girls' classes to comfort students. That's when I stopped and looked around. No one was absent except for the girl who was supposed to be next to me, the girl who always complained about her job at Panera. Helped me with songs I was trying to learn, shared music with me, read the papers I wrote. I never even took the time to learn her name. I felt horrible. People were just looking at me for crying out of nowhere. I'm usually pretty emotionless when it comes to these kinds of things, but at that moment, I realized what the hell was going on and who had died, and felt genuinely sad to the point of tears.